Ukraine has just called Putin's nuclear bluff with this attack. Ukraine has shown Russia that it isn't afraid of what Oreshnik is supposed to be capable of delivering. In essence, Ukraine is daring Russia to strike back with the ultimate response. Flamingo drone missiles just hit your nuclear infrastructure, Putin. Are you going to respond with a nuclear attack, thus destroying the very few shreds of goodwill that you have left in the world? Or are you going to reveal that all of your nuclear threats were bluffs that you were using to get what you wanted out of Ukraine? Ukraine is betting it's the former. And in making that bet, it has destroyed the perception of invincibility that Putin is trying to build around Oreshnik. After all, it's true that Ukraine will seriously struggle to shoot Oreshnik missiles down when they're in flight. Any nation would. As Army Recognition noted in August 2025, no existing air defense system can reliably intercept and destroy a hypersonic missile before it reaches its target. Interception is possible, however, it's unlikely, and that is a serious problem for Ukraine, as even its US-made Patriot air defense systems struggle when confronted with missiles like Oreshnik. That's where the perception of invincibility comes from, and Ukraine has shattered that perception by doing what it seems to constantly do in its war against Russia, thinking outside the box. If Oreshnik can't be taken down reliably when it's in flight, then the solution to the Oreshnik problem becomes simple. Take the missile out at its source, and it won't ever get into the air. Right now, it's unknown whether Ukraine's attack on Kapustin Yar actually destroyed any Oreshnik missiles. However, the sources we've already discussed suggest that Ukraine has damaged Russia's missile preparation facilities. Without those facilities, missiles like the Oreshnik become extremely expensive paperweights that Russia can't use. Interestingly, Euromaidan Press also suggests that Ukraine's January strike may go some way toward flipping the deterrence balance. Missiles like Oreshnik represent a type of threat that Ukraine can't pose to Russia. Even if you take nuclear capabilities out of the equation, Oreshnik is faster and, if Russia is to be believed, can hit harder than anything that Ukraine has in its arsenal. That is still the case, even when taking Flamingo into account. But the real key here is that Flamingo was never supposed to exist. Ukraine didn't have anything like this drone missile hybrid before Putin launched his invasion, and it took years to develop these types of deep strike weapons after Russia's soldiers crossed the border. In short, Ukraine didn't have any kind of deterrent against Russia's missiles. Now it's proven that it has a deterrent. It's not that Ukraine used Flamingo. By October 2025, Militani was reporting that Ukraine had already used Flamingo 9 times within about a month of the missile entering production. What's vital about this latest strike is that Ukraine has proven that it can use Flamingo drone missiles to score direct hits on one of Russia's most critical strategic sites. Kapustin Yar is needed to launch Oreshnik. That means it will be loaded with the best air defenses that Russia has, and Flamingo still bypass them all to score a hit. Putin will see that and be terrified about what it means once Ukraine has scaled up its Flamingo production to the point where it's built a strong stockpile. Kapustin Yar will likely be targeted many more times, but there are plenty of other Russian sites within the Flamingo's range that are associated with the Russian nuclear complex. The Non-Proliferation Policy Education Center has an interactive map showcasing many of these sites, both active and inactive. What's to stop Ukraine from hitting the Shaikovka airbase? If Putin was going to back up his threats, he would have done so by now with any number of other nuclear-capable missiles. The nuclear bluff has been called, and Putin has been exposed as holding no cards. There's an interesting postscript to this story. Now, the first answer to the question that we just posed is that Ukraine's strike on Kapustin Yar is important as much for what it represents as for what it achieved. Yes, Ukraine has taken a key Russian launch site offline, hopefully for an extended period of time. That means no more Oreshnik launches until Russia is able to get the site up and running again. However, as Euromaidan Press points out, Ukraine's Flamingo strike represents the first known case of a non-nuclear state successfully attacking infrastructure that is used to prepare nuclear-capable ballistic missiles on the territory of the country that has made those missiles. This is massive, as we'll explore in more detail in a few moments. Ukraine has just called Putin's nuclear bluff with this attack. Ukraine has shown Russia that it isn't afraid of what Oreshnik is supposed to be capable of delivering. In essence, Ukraine is daring Russia to strike back with the ultimate response. After all, it's true that Ukraine will seriously struggle to shoot Oreshnik missiles down when they're in flight. Any nation would. As Army Recognition noted in August 2025, no existing air defense system can reliably intercept and destroy a hypersonic missile before it reaches its target. Interception is possible, however, it's unlikely, and that is a serious problem for Ukraine, as even its US-made Patriot air defense systems struggle when confronted with missiles like Oreshnik. That's where the perception of invincibility comes from, and Ukraine has shattered that perception by doing what it seems to constantly do in its war against Russia, thinking outside the box. If Oreshnik can't be taken down reliably when it's in flight, then the solution to the Oreshnik problem becomes simple, a tangible warning to Ukraine and its partners that Russia could do a lot more than it has in Ukraine. The keyword here being could. It can't anymore. Ukraine's Flamingo missile just hit the heart of Russia's nuclear threat, leaving Oreshnik grounded and Putin's nuclear bluff intact. That's where the perception of invincibility comes from, and Ukraine has shattered that perception by doing what it seems to constantly do in its war against Russia, thinking outside the box. If Oreshnik can't be taken down reliably when it's in flight, then the solution to the Oreshnik problem becomes simple. Take the missile out at its source, and it won't ever get into the air. Right now, it's unknown whether Ukraine's attack on Kapustin Yar actually destroyed any Oreshnik missile. Pressure is being placed on Putin to put his money where his mouth is. Russia keeps making nuclear threats. Now back them up. Respond with a nuclear strike to a conventional attack and watch as your country becomes a global pariah, the likes of which the world has never seen. Ukraine knows that Putin won't go that far. Whatever inroads Russia is trying to make with the US would fall to pieces. China would likely withdraw from Russia, costing Putin his most powerful ally. It's unlikely that India would stick around either. The missile appears to be based on the design for the RS-26 IRREVERSIBLE, which Russia began developing in 2008. And some proclaim that its destructive force is equivalent to that of a nuclear warhead, even when it's armed with a conventional one. Oh, and speaking of nuclear warheads, Oreshnik is also supposedly nuclear capable. What we're seeing here are specifications for a cruise missile-like weapon that are better than those offered by America's Tomahawk missiles. And here's the best part for Ukraine, and that part will make Putin cry. A Flamingo costs 5 times less to produce than a Tomahawk. When Oreshnik flew, Putin thought he had unleashed Russia's trump card. This was the unstoppable missile, hypersonic, nuclear-capable, a tangible warning to Ukraine and its partners that Russia could do a lot more than it has in Ukraine. The keyword here being could. It can't anymore. Ukraine's Flamingo missile just hit the heart of Russia's nuclear threat, leaving Oreshnik grounded and Putin's nuclear bluff in tatters. On February 5th, United 24 Media was among several outlets to report on what may be the most important long-range strike that Ukraine has ever carried out. Ukrainian-made Flamingo missiles flew for hundreds of miles through Ukrainian territory and toward Russia's Astrakhan region, which is in southwest Russia. Running along the lower Volga River and bordered by Kazakhstan, that entire region is dangerous to Ukraine due to its proximity to the border that Ukraine shares with Russia. However, Astrakhan is also dangerous because it's home to Kapustin Yar, and in Kapustin Yar lies a missile testing facility that Russia is using to launch one of its most dangerous missiles, Oreshnik. The missile that Russia used to attack Lviv just a few short weeks ago. Ukraine wanted revenge for that Lviv strike, and you'll learn why in just a few minutes. That revenge came in the form of Flamingo missiles, which flew right through Russia's air defenses in Kapustin Yar to score direct hits against the very base from which Russia launched its hypersonic missiles in the attack against Lviv. This is a massive success for Ukraine, and the country's general staff was quick to take to Telegram to explain why. During January 2026, the defense forces of Ukraine carried out a series of successful strikes on a complex of hangar-type buildings at the Kapustin Yar test site in the Astrakhan region of the Russian Federation, where pre-launch preparation of intercontinental and medium-range ballistic missiles is taking place, using long-range strike weapons of Ukrainian production, in particular the FP-5 Flamingo, the General Staff reported. It also added that it has evidence that the January strike was successful, adding, according to available information, several buildings on the test site were damaged to varying degrees. One of the hangars was significantly damaged, and some of the personnel were evacuated from the site. Kapustin Yar may not have been shut down completely. However, it was hit hard enough to slow down any attempt that Russia may have been making to launch more Oreshnik missiles at Ukraine. And even more importantly, Ukraine sent a message with this attack. We just hit Oreshnik in its home, and we can do it again. More evidence of what Ukraine achieved comes from the Exilanova Plus Telegram channel. On the same day that Ukraine's general staff made its announcement, that channel published a satellite photograph of Kapustin Yar. It also confirmed that Ukraine carried out the attack on the night of January 27th into 28th, and that Ukraine's Flamingo drone missile hybrids appeared to focus on what it calls the 105th site of the missile testing facility. In particular, Ukraine hit several hangars that Russia uses for pre-launch preparations of its missiles. Presumably, Oreshnik is among those missiles. If those hangars have been destroyed, Russia now has to rebuild them before it can even consider using Oreshnik again. And what Russia is able to rebuild, Ukraine can once again destroy. After all, Flamingo has the power, and Ukraine is pumping up production. Toward the end of September, Militani reported that the makers of Flamingo, Firepoint, had purchased a large stock of old aircraft engines for the purposes of ramping up production. Those engines aren't suitable for their original use anymore. However, they're more than capable of powering along a drone missile hybrid that makes a one-way trip to Russia, lasting just a few hours. With repairs and modifications, those engines offered Firepoint a cheap way to get its Flamingo weapons off the production lines and into Ukraine's hands. At the time of the article's publication, Militani said that Firepoint was making 2 Flamingos per month. By the end of 2025, it aimed to hit a monthly production of 200. While we don't know if Firepoint was successful in achieving that goal, what this tells us is that Ukraine is going all in on the missile that it used to attack Russia's main Oreshnik base. That's worrying for Putin for several reasons, all of which we'll explain later in the video, but for now, Putin has to worry about the fact that Ukraine is building plenty of a weapon that's far more terrifying than any of the long-range drones that it's used to attack Russian targets in the past.